because it's already discussed last meeting. So I'll go now with discussing culture. So I'd like to ask you first, how do you define culture? Any volunteer? Based from what you read in our module.
Hello po, ma'am.
Hello, Michael, you're acknowledged.
For me, culture is a set of beliefs and practices that differs from a country or places po.
Okay, that's correct. How about for the others? How do
Um,
you define culture? Yes, Cherry.
yes po. For me po, it is a huge concept which includes a lot of different ideas, similarities, or parang belief, customs, ganun po, ma'am, that is reflected within a community or a group of communities. Yun lang po, ma'am.
Yes, correct. Thank you. How about the others? Last one. Um, Pauline Nanale. About Siv Calliope.
Good afternoon po, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
For me po, ma'am, culture is any belief or a norm in a certain area po. That's all po.
Okay, thank you. All your answers are correct. Ina Balaloy for po, ma'am. Culture is something nasanayan in a society. A culture of another can be wrong, vice versa. Okay, that's correct. So, um, it, it is commonly, you can commonly hear that culture is everywhere. It is around us. And based sa mga answers na binigay nyo, you can comprehend that ethics has a wide and vast scope. And because of that scope, it the scholars found it so complex to define what culture really is. So one of your classmates, Cherry, mentioned that it is a huge concept. Yes, it is correct. It is huge because of its scope. That is why scholars found it difficult to define what culture is. So here in my presentation, I chose one definition of culture that I think sufficiently or enough that address the complexity of the wide scope of what culture is. Is my screen visible?
Yes po po.
Yes. Here, the term culture refers to the cumulative deposit of knowledge. When we say cumulative, meaning to say it is growing, it is increasing, it is adding deposit of knowledge, the experiences, the beliefs, values, the attitudes, the meanings, the hierarchies, the religion, the notions of time, roles, spatial relations, concepts of the universe, and material objects and possessions acquired by a group of people in the course of generations through individual and group striving. So based from this definition, it really does cover a wide scope of the universe or of everything around us. So there are a lot of determining factor to see or to determine how cultured a person is. You can determine whether it is through the person's way of living, the way he acts, the way he behave, the way he speak. It can also be through his hobbies, through his likes, dislikes, taste of music, um, his course of discipline, these values on how his or her parents raised them, how they view religion, what religion they belong to, what are their roles in the community. So those are the determining factor of and considerations of the culture. So, kaya mahirap i-define kung ano ang culture because super lawak niya and it almost cover everything around us. Other culture, we have here the first theory, the cultural relativism. I have here a short video clip to explain, and later on, the essential points will be discussed one by one. So continuing, this is the essential points of the video presented that you watched earlier. Cultural relativism is a view that good and bad are relative to culture, meaning to say you can determine if an action is good or bad depending to the culture or belief of group of people or organizations that you are into. Different cultures have different moral codes. For example, as a Christian, it is immoral for us to have multiple spouses. But for other religion, I think I've used this example during our last meeting. For Muslims, it is permissible for them to enter into a polygamous relationship, which is having two or more spouses as long as the man can provide for the needs of all his spouses. So, dito sa cultural relativism, yung sense ng judging whether an action is right or wrong is parang nawawala since what is good and what is bad is relative to the culture or to the organizations that we belong to. We cannot judge those Muslims who have multiple wives because it is acceptable in their norms and in their beliefs, and we cannot judge Christians who condemns those who have or those who are committing adultery for them because for them it is immoral and it is a violation of the divine law. Also, here in the Philippines, it is illegal to use marijuana, but for other countries such as Canada and Australia, it is legal to use marijuana for medicinal purposes. And we cannot judge those who use marijuana in that country, and we cannot compel them from using marijuana since it is legal for them. But here in our country, we are prohibited to use such drug for it is still illegal in our country. Here is the list of the claims or the point of view or rather the beliefs of every member of cultural relativists who would consider themselves as a cultural relativist. First, different societies have different moral codes, as what I've discussed. a while ago, each society or each place, each community, each group of people, each group of organization have all different norms or different rules and regulations that they are following. So what might be right to them might not be right to other group of people. What is applicable to them might not be applicable to other people, and what is moral for them might not be moral to other people. Second claim, the moral code of a society determines what is right within that society. That is, if the moral code of a society says that a certain action is right, at least within that society. So, dun sa example ko kanina about the use of marijuana, dito sa Philippines, maybe in other country, it is illegal to use marijuana, and using marijuana here might arrest you, might give the police reason to arrest you, while in the countries mentioned before a while ago, the Canada, Australia, and neighboring country, I guess, it is okay for them to use marijuana for medicinal purposes. Likewise with the religion distinction for Christian and Muslims having or committing adultery or entering into a polygamous relationship. Those norms is only applicable to the religion that they belong to. Okay, if medyo magulo yung pakaka-explain ko, you can tell me so I can further explain that to you. If and also if you have question, you can butt in anytime. Also dun sa video na pinanood natin kanina, it uses the generational gap to visualize how cultural relativism works. So before, way before, it is acceptable to use human as a sacrifice, but in the present, it is illegal or it is not acceptable to use human as a sacrifice. But we cannot judge our ancestors or those who perform human sacrifice before, since it is accepted in their culture. Also, likewise, they can judge us for prohibiting human sacrifice because as of the moment, it is illegal to deprive anyone of his right to life. Third claim, there is no objective standard that can be used to judge one society's code as better than another's. There are no moral truths that hold for all people at all times. So this best describe what cultural relativism is. Na-mention ko rin before, from the term relative, it is contrary with having objective standard, with having absolute and fixed standard of truth or absolute standard of norms. Meaning to say, you can easily justify your action on the grounds that your culture or your beliefs tells you that it is correct or it is right, it is moral. Therefore, the sense of judging, the sense of justifiability is quietly not manifested in the cultural relativist perspective. Fourth, the moral code of our own society has no special status. It is but one among many. So it is undeniable that has each has different beliefs. We are raised by different people. We are raised in different community. We are raised with different way of living. Therefore, we can't conclude that our belief should be the belief of all. That our culture should be everyone's culture as well. Because the fact that all of us have different culture is an affirmation that our culture is only a part of, is only a dust particle of Milky Way wide pool. So, yun yung sinasabi dito. It is but one among many. Our own culture or our culture that we have right now is just one of the many culture that the universe has. And lastly, on the claims, it is arrogant for us to judge other cultures. We should always be tolerant of them. The cultural relativist promotes cultural diversity. It is the attitude that they are implying, they are promoting, and attitude that we all should learn to be able to understand and to be able to be on the perspective, be on a shoe of cultural relativist. We should acknowledge the differences, the diversity of culture, and be able to respect each culture, each belief, and avoid to judge those others who have different belief because as a cultural relativist, we should be open to the idea that that action of others might be a reason or a factor, a result of his or her culture. So I guess na daanan nyo rin or na-scroll nyo upon scrolling on the social media the article of a mother who chose to save herself than the baby. So those that article gained various comments. There are hateful comments, there are support comments, there are defending comments, um, various comments. So that mother, we cannot judge easily that mother na it is immoral, it is not right, it is unfair to the baby because that mother has her own belief, has her own um, considerations when she arrived to that kind of decision. Maybe that mother is an egoist and we cannot blame her for being an egoist. We cannot blame her for seeing herself as more important than the life of her baby, or maybe she has a reason why she came up to that decision. So ito yung parang lesson or pinopromote ng mga cultural relativists. We should not be arrogant. It is arrogant for us to judge other cultures. We should always be tolerant or respectful of other beliefs, other cultures. Next, here we have three nationality, Filipino, American, and Italian. And below each nationality are their core concepts or pagkakakilanlan which they are generally known for. So dito rin sa cultural relativism, we can apply stereotyping. So kapag naka-encounter tayo ng Filipino or when you were asked about Filipino, the first thing that comes to your mind are hospitable, mahiyain, modest, very courteous, warm, respectful, and marunong makipagkapwa-tao. And when you say American, the first thing that comes to your mind that American are generally known for being idealistic, liberated, self-government, equality, individualism, material comfort, and practicality. And last and least, in example, are the Italians. They are generally known for being confident, for their practice of campanilismo, for their elegance, for their politeness, boldness, flexibility, and formality. So, dun sa nasabi ko kanina sa pagiging sa pag-stereotype as part of the cultural relativism. Ito yung mga typically maririnig natin. Ang mga Filipino, they are mahiyain. Ang mga Filipino, they are hospitable. Pag sinabi ng mga American, pag sinabing American, they are liberated, they are self-governed, they are practical. And when we say Italian, they are generally known being as elegant, as flexible, as formal. So each nationality, each country has distinction, and with this distinction, they might arrive in a different way of living as ours. As Filipino, since known tayo bilang mahiyain, it can also be assumed that we are conservative, contrary to the way of living of the Americans, which are liberated. So we cannot easily judge each other because each nationality has different cultures. Therefore, different way of living, different way of behaving as well. Let's proceed now with the Filipino culture and discuss also each strengths and weaknesses. First on the list is our attitude of pakikisama. When we say pakikisama, it refers to having and maintaining good public relation. The good thing about pakikisama is you can avoid clash with other people. For example, you belong to a group of friends, and dun sa circle nyo, magkakaiba-iba kayo ng attitude for sure, and you being or practicing pakikisama, you try to be friendly to both of your friends or to all of the members of your circle by talking nicely to them, by joining with their trips, and making friends with them. So by making friends, of course, you can avoid clash since you are practicing pakikisama. You try to be one of them. You try to understand them. You try to communicate to them, and you try to mingle with your friends. Also, the good thing also is keeping good feelings in all personal interactions. It's not hindi lang sa sa mga friends, but also when you randomly walking on a street, then a group of tambays approach you, especially when you are a newbie in the neighborhood. Especially when you are newbie to the neighborhood, the tambays will kunyari nagiinuman and you pass by, they will um, give you a shot, and as a pakikisama, you'll take that shot kahit hindi ka umiinom, just to be friends with them and just to know them, and para sa pakikisama. Let's go to the weaknesses or the bad side of pakikisama. Filipinos may submit to group opinion and over-generous praise for one another rather than candid terms. So this sentiment or this sentence is mostly manifested in the social media ngayon. If you're familiar with pa-woke term sa Twitter, where, for example, one is bashing nag-trend na binabash si, let's say, Jinky Pacquiao for wearing approximately 2 million during the recent Manny Pacquiao's fight. Most people that I've read while scrolling my Twitter account bashed Jinky Pacquiao, assuming and accusing that ginagamit nila yung pera ng taong bayan since Manny Pacquiao is a politician now, and that is too extravagant, Yung iba naman na nakakabasa nun and that are strictly practicing pakikisama, parang makikibash na lang din. So that's the bad side of pakikisama kasi you are just going with the majority. Kung ano yung nakita mong ginagawa nung iba, ang ginagaya mo na lang din even though it is not that reasonable thing to do. And lastly here, the bad thing is is about avoiding to say no. Actually, I can really relate to these weaknesses because I really find it hard to say no or to refuse to my friends or other people whom I know personally. Like for example, kahit may work ako or may studies ako or busy ako, when some of my friends ask me to join them for a lunch date or dinner date, I find it so hard to refuse to them. Kaya ang ginagawa ko na lang is to cram myself and just to be able na makisama sa kanila and to maintain a harmonious relationship with my friends and other people whom I know personally. Another Filipino characteristic is ang pagiging mahiyain. It is defined as a feeling of loneliness, shame, or embarrassment, and shyness. The good thing about pagiging mahiyain is that you are concerned of how one appears in the eyes of another's. So, I, uh, I, I myself is so shy and timid, and just from my experience, I am always conscious of how other people will see me. So I'll try my best to act good, to behave well, and to talk nicely to other people. When that particular circumstance come, when I become so conscious about how I mingle with other people, I tend to do things that are only presentable and that are only good. That are only good. So, yun yung parang good thing naman sa pagiging mahiyain. Nako-conscious ka, parang nalilimit mo yung sarili mo na dapat ganito ako mamaya, dapat hindi ako mapahiya, dapat I leave good impression to the people na mga makakasama ko. And the other strength is you're afraid to do bad things. So, syempre, pag you're conscious, you always aim to have a good impression of others towards you. So, you'll only do good and act well, behave well, talk nicely, even dress well, so that you appear nice to them. And by doing such, you're avoiding or hindi ka nakakagawa ng mga candid actions, ng mga bad things. And the weaknesses, of course, anything that is too much is not good. Too much hiya lead to having inferiority complex and losing self-confidence. So too much hiya might, like for example, those person who will only sit in a corner all the time, those who prohibit themselves from opening up to others, from letting their voice heard, from being too much introvert to the point that even his or her family members, he's being so shy to mingle with, to talk to. And by that time, you are slowly feeling that you are losing your self-confidence and that you are already experiencing inferiority complex. Okay, next, the utang na loob. It involves the concept of reciprocity or returning the favor. Strength are it upholds group harmony and demand balancing of obligations and debts. So when one do you good, your conscience automatically tells you that you should do them good too. For example, someone lend you money. If someone lend you money sa pamasahe, for example, may kasama mo yung friend mo and wala kang pera. So, pinahiram ka for your pamasahe. So, the next time na makakasama yung friend mo to return the favor ikaw naman yung magpapamasahe para sa kanya. Papamasahe, ng fare para sa kanila. Also, with your family members, if your sister or brother helps you with the household chores, the next time that you see your brother or sister struggling to do same household chore, as an utang na loob, you'll initiate to do that chore. So by that, you are reciprocating the good deeds that other people made to you or do you. And also, because of utang na loob, it's not only good things. Kapag yung ibang tao naman is sinaktan ka or parang pinahiya ka, your tendency is to make gantihan yung taong yon, but that is not advisable, but somewhat part of our conscience na parang part of our natural tendency is magalit rin. Kaya accidentally or intentionally, ginagantihan rin natin sila. The weakness, to avoid being dubbed as walang utang na loob, sometimes do things that may be bad just to return a received favor. Example of this is scholarship from a politician, assuming that this is just a scenario. For example, mayor a scholarship, grants you a scholarship, even though you know that that mayor is corrupt or practicing illegal transactions, as an utang na loob, and for the sake na hindi ka masabihang walang utang na loob, your tendency is to just vote that politician again para lang hindi ka masabihang walang utang na loob. Kasi syempre, every one of us don't like to hear na sinasabihang walang utang na loob kasi parang it's a negative thoughts about you. Last in our list of Filipino characteristics is the pagiging hospitable. Hospitality means the innate trait of Filipinos to be courteous and entertaining their guests. Strength, Filipinos are known to be warm, welcoming, and accommodating. So, sa mga foreigners na nagve-visit dito, there is one common impressions that we Filipinos have from them. It is we are so hospitable kasi kahit hindi foreigner, kahit kapwa Pilipino, we are so willing to help. Like pag magtatanong ng directions, we are so willing to help to guide them kung saan papunta. Lalo na sa mga foreigners, even though hindi lahat sa atin fluent mag-English, but we try our best, we try so hard to communicate them and be able to help them with whatever they need as long as we have the means and as long as we can extend or lend a hand to everyone. So yun yung magandang bagay sa pagiging hospitable kasi foreigners or other nationality view us as having a very good or very nice attitude. The weakness naman, being too hospitable, we are being prone to being abused or maltreated. So, as what I've said earlier, anything too much is bad. We should still not let others abuse us and take advantage of our intention, especially if we know that we are putting our lives, especially when we already knew or our intuition tells us that that person is kahina-hinala or parang may intention to take advantage sa kabaitan natin, we should set boundaries and limitations kung kailan tayo magiging hospitable, kung kailan tayo magiging deadma or magiging secure, safe, ganun. So, sometimes we should believe our intuitions. So, the last topic in the module 3 is about the generational values or the generational gap. One of the determining factor also of culture, why we have different culture, is the notion of time or the generations. So as you can see and as what is manifested, time really changed a lot. So before it is normal to marry at a young age, but in the present, parang it's being a trend to marry on our 30s or late 20s because sa panahon ngayon, everyone's busy. Women are um, women are being acknowledged and feeling more empowered. That's why they are so career centered. Not just the women but also the men. Kaya parang they put marriage as least priority. Hindi naman least, but they put priority or focus more on the career and kung anong pinagkakaibisihan nila. Career studies, ganun. Also, before, it is normal to have a big family with 10 children, 12 children. And ngayon, as we compare it now, parang everyone mostly only plans to have one child or two or three, maximum of three. Parang bihira na ngayon yung gusto ng maraming anak. Though meron pa rin, pero bihira na lang yung nagkakaroon ng 12 na anak or 11 na anak, 10, 13. And when there is a family who have that number of children, parang big deal na unlike dati na it's just normal to have big family. Hindi lang dun sa ganong belief, also sa way of thinking. Kasi before, women are very conservative to the way they dress, to the way they behave, to the way they communicate with the opposite sex. But now in the present, we're gradually being liberated or um, ang ang trend ngayon is self love, parang you tend to do things that you want to do for yourself, including wearing revealing clothes, um, having piercings, having tattoos, which are before sa paningin ng mga matatanda is kinda contrary sa belief nila. So that is how generation is distincted with the present, before generation from the present generation. A lot has changed. So to recap, the module 2, recap what Module 2 is all about, it discussed the definition of culture, which is the cumulative deposit of knowledge, experience, beliefs, values, attitudes, meaning, hierarchies, religion, notions of time, rules, spatial relations, concepts of the universe, and material objects and possessions acquired by a group of people in the course of generation through individual and group striving. And under the culture is the cultural relativism, which is a view that good and bad are relative to culture and that different cultures have different moral codes. We all discussed the claims of the cultural relativisms and the Filipino culture or characteristics and their strengths and weaknesses. Do you have any questions, class?
Ako ba, ma'am, may question po ako.
Yes.
Is cultural relativism po, ma'am, is good or bad po?
Okay. Cultural relativism has its advantages and disadvantages. So yung na-mention natin kanina, one of its advantage is that it promotes diversity and teach us to respect the differences of cultures and beliefs. While its disadvantage, as what I've mentioned kanina, it nawawala yung sense of justice since kapag may ginawa ka, for example, to um, for example, you stole money to help other people, you can easily justify your act of stealing on the grounds that your belief it's okay to do bad to for greater purpose, which is to help other people. Gets nyo ba? Parang kahit magnakaw ka, pwede mong i-justify yung pagnanakaw mo on the grounds na nagnanakaw naman ako kasi sa paniniwala ko, okay lang magnakaw. Basta yung ninakaw ko is para sa pagkain ng pamilya namin. So nawawala yung sense ng pagkakaroon ng right and wrong, good or bad. Since ang kailangan lang naman is to respect each other's differences or each other's beliefs. So, any question? If none, kung nabasa nyo sa Module 2, we have there the second learning output. And since we still have 30 minutes, we can answer that now para wala na kayong problemahin na isasubmit on the succeeding days. So, is it okay for you na ngayon na natin sagutan or gawin yung learning output instead na i-post pa sa Google Classroom and submit it to maximize our meeting? Hello? Class, are you still with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, let's just open your module. So, the first activity is to discuss the advantages of cultural relativism and disadvantages and cite if you are for or against it. since I gave already one advantage and one disadvantage, um, you are no longer allowed to use what I've cited. So any volunteer to answer the first question to cite the advantage and disadvantage of cultural relativism? Okay, I'll just call randomly na lang. Cyrene, Esperanza, Cyrene. How about Ami, Furing? Adeline, Joy Reales.
Ano po ulit, Ma'am yung tanong?
Can you cite one advantage and one disadvantage of cultural relativism?
Advantage saka disadvantage, hindi po basta-basta ma-ju-judge yung, hindi po basta-basta ma-ju-judge yung actions ng isang tao. Both na po yun, ma'am, advantage and disadvantage. Since wala pong absolute na parang established na rules or pwedeng pag-assessan.
Okay, so are you for or against cultural relativism?
Sa tingin ko po, yes po. Since personally, I try po na maging mas understanding po sa mga circumstances ng mga tao kahit mahirap. Yan po. Kasi iba-iba naman po tayo ng pinagdadaanan. Kaya dapat kahit papaano maging understanding pa rin po.
Okay, thank you. How about you, Alessandro?
Hello po. Rinig po ba?
Hello? Yes.
Parang advantage and disadvantage pa rin po ba, ma'am?
Apo.
For me po, disadvantage muna is nagkakaroon po ng bias po with as regards to many things which leads to conflict po, madam, between communities or people, madam. And advantage, it gives a wider perspective and outlook in life because you will be exposed to a lot of different thoughts and beliefs of others, which can also contribute to how you will be in the future.
Okay, so are you for or against cultural relativism?
I am for cultural relativism.
Okay, why?
Because it opens up a lot as a person po, madam. Kasi kung hindi ka po, kung against ka po kasi sa cultural relativism, na parang nalilimit pa namin kung ano yung pwedeng mong gawin sa buhay mo daw. Kasi nababound ka ng cultures na nandoon lang sa community na yun. Yan po.
Okay, thank you. How about you, Miko Imperial? Miko. Christian. Okay na. Arellano Henry Clyde. Arnold Kiakil. Arnold Kiakil.
Hello po, ma'am.
Hello, good afternoon. So,
Good
sign
afternoon po.
this advantage of cultural relativism.
Para sa akin po, ma'am, yung advantage po ng cultural relativism is, yun nga po, hindi ka po ma-judge sa base po dun sa mga kinasanayan mo. Ang problema lang po, ang disadvantage po niya ay paano po kung masyado mo pong na-adapt yung yung culture po dun sa lugar nyo. Then, pumunta ka po sa ibang lugar. Then, wala po silang idea sa kung ano talaga yung pinanggalingan mo, yung mga kinasanayan mo sa lugar nyo. Then, pwede ka pong, kumbaga, mapagmukhang mali o masama po yung ginagawa nyo.
Okay, so are you for or against cultural relativism?
I'm not against naman po, ma'am.
Okay, why?
I'm not against po kasi parang masyado na po kasi mahirap kung kunyari, kung magkaroon pa po ng pagkakataon na pag-isahin po yung mismong culture po sa katulad po dito sa isang buong mundo kasi iba-iba na po yung nakasanayan. Tapos yun po, yung yung epekto po sa kanila, yung epekto po sa pamumuhay nila, yung malaki na rin po yung naging epekto sa para po mabago yung buhay nila o para mas magamit pa po nila para mas ma-progress po yung buhay nila, ganun. Gamit po yung kultura nila. Nagets po ba?
Thank you. Apo, gets ka na. Okay. Cherry and Rafael.
For me po, ma'am, super laki po ng advantage ng cultural relativism kasi it allows the people to yung tulad po na nasabi, wag agad man judge. And kung one concrete example po is yung kapag may na-meet po tayo na bagong tao, for example, sa BU, sa university, syempre, iba-iba po kaming school na pinanggalingan and iba-iba rin po yung mga nakasanayan namin. So, instead of being, ba't ganun siya ganun? Parang alam na natin na sa iba kasi yung ganun sa kanila, iba yung sa amin, ganun. So, we try to make amends na I'll adjust for them and for sure, they adjust rin kasi alam rin naman nila na nanggaling tayo sa iba-ibang lugar. So, for me, I'll agree po with the idea of cultural relativism. But, kung may certain disadvantage man po, yun is yung parang making it an excuse or parang abusing the fact that since iba-iba tayo, parang pwede ko tong gawin since sa amin pwede to ganun. May mga boundaries dapat tayo na siniset. Like, okay, pwede to sa atin, pero let's take a moment. Let's take this decision. Let's consider others in making any decision. Kasi hindi lang tayo yung po. Ganun, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's a very good analysis. How about you, Ezekiel?
Ma'am.
Rinig po ba, ma'am?
Yes.
My thoughts on cultural relativism po is I understand the notion, the idea that it could create, it could bring up different cultures and have unity, or it could harmonize society as a whole. But I see it more in a different way. Cultural relativism for me seems to limit moral progress. May mga tribo po kaya na nag-exist pa sa mundo na hindi pa masyadong nakaka-catch up sa society ngayon. For example, may isang tribe sa Malawi, urban Malawi, na may tradition sila na ginagawa na ang hyena, tinitake nila yung virginity ng mga young teenage girls, mga around 12, 13, 14, like that. So, if somehow we would try to implement cultural relativism, parang may mga moral issues pa na maho-halt, matitigil dahil we are trying to accept lahat ng cultural traditions, lahat ng
na nag-exist pa, which is in this case hindi naman lahat ano although we try to accept and everything, there are some things talaga na very mataas ang hindi masyadong malalim na pag-usapan. Like yung nasabi ko kaninang example, mahirap siyang i-value kung talaga bang okay lang ba yung ganitong kultura na nag-exist pa sa ngayon. Okay lang ba tayo na ganun yung makikita natin na may mga taong nakakaranas pa ng ganito. I see the benefit of having cultural relativism, but I am against it for now kasi hindi pa yung mga kultura na nag-exist today is hindi pa lahat nakaka-catch up or wala pang progress yung iba. Slower progress ang pacing nila compared sa others like sa mga mga rich countries like whatever. Yun lang po.
Okay, that's a very good criticism. In fact, one of the loopholes talaga ng cultural relativism is that it limits moral, what is your term? Moral growth.
Moral
It
progress,
limits, it
ma'am.
really, yeah, okay, it limits moral progress because it denies the humanitarian rule dun sa example niya na ang circumcision of women, of teenage girls. Like that instance, if you are a cultural relativist, you will tolerate that practice and deny the fact that that tradition or that belief is somewhat a violation of women's right and form of abuse na rin siguro sa mga bata and sa children. So yun yung loophole din ng cultural relativism is that it denies and invalidates humanitarian rule since you can always justify your act on the grounds again na it is acceptable in our culture, it is acceptable in our belief. So doon sa pag-circumcise ng women's genitalia on the during the teenage years of that girls on that tribe, parang kung sa atin, kung titingnan natin, that is immoral kasi you are doing something against sa body ng babae. But for them, they continue doing that, and for the perspective ng mga cultural relativists, they will just tolerate it kasi yun yung acceptable sa nila, acceptable sa culture nila. So thank you for raising that good criticism. Okay, next, John Nathaniel.
Hello ma'am. Good afternoon po. Bago po sumagot siguro, nagdagan ko lang po sagot ni Ezekiel po kasi yun din sana yung sagot ko eh. Yung about kasi doon sa tribe na yun, isa pang disadvantage yun kasi yung lalaki HIV positive. So they pursue yung culture na yun kahit alam na nilang mapapahamak sila. Yun lang po. Pero ang sagot ko naman po ngayon, yung cultural relativism, ang advantage niya is nahanap mo yung sarili mo. Halimbawa, dito sa Pilipinas, yung culture against sa'yo, pwede kang lumipat sa ibang lugar na yung kagustuhan mo or yung culture nila hindi against sa'yo or yung pwede sa'yo. Ganun. Pero ang nagiging disadvantage po kasi noon, it would create chaos or it would create na kaguluhan since na halimbawa sabihin na natin na group by group na sila. Tapos yung isang group or isang particular group napakalaki kasi maraming gustong sumali sa group na yon. So ngayon baka isipin nila na yung culture nila or yung belief nila supreme kaysa ibang culture, kaya pwede silang mag-rage ng war or kung ano pa bang gusto nila, basta makita na sila ang supreme or superior sa lahat ng culture. Iyon po sa akin.
Yes, that is correct and a good analysis then on the cultural relativism practice. So anyone would also like to volunteer?
Ma'am,
Yes, Save Calliope.
good afternoon po, ma'am. In connection po sa mga sinabi po nila, ma'am. I have an idea, ma'am, but i-start ko muna po to, ma'am, sa disadvantage ng cultural relativism. It's hard, ma'am, to talk about one culture to another culture if hindi tayo gagamit ng isang medium. Ang disadvantage lang nito, ma'am, kasi, ma'am, is it's hard to tell a person or a group if yung paggagamit mo na kung makikipag-usap ka sa maling paraan. In the other hand, ma'am, the advantage of this cultural relativism is that you gain information, you gain knowledge, and it creates you to be a humble and a responsible person. Kumbaga, ma'am, if you gain knowledge, mas lumalawak yung kaisipan mo, mas nagiging responsible ka sa mga acts mo. Kung ano ba ang gagawin mo, ganito or ganyan. Then, idudugtong ko na din po yung education. Proper education will lead us to kumbaga hindi tayo magkaka-chaos or magkakagulo sa pag kumbaga sa pagtalakay natin ng mga iba't ibang culture. With proper education, yung disadvantage ng cultural relativism is parang nawawala na because sa pag-educate natin sa sarili natin sa pag-aaral nito parang yun na parang nawawala na lang talaga yun po, ma'am. And for me, ma'am, that's all. Yun po.
Okay, thank you. I just got curious dun sa minention mong medium. What medium are you referring to, or do you have anything on your mind to use as a medium to know or determine the culture of the different cultures?
Yun yung sinabi ko na po, ma'am, is one of it yung gusto ko po, ma'am, na medium na magamit dito, ma'am, is yung school na, ma'am, or university na nagtatakil po dito, ma'am. Not I think hindi appropriate na gamitin na ang social media, but pinaka ano pa rin po dito, ma'am, is yung school, ma'am. Kasi, ma'am, sa school kumbaga maraming tao tayong nakakasalamuha, hindi lang puro lahat Katoliko. Kumbaga, ma'am, ning diverse na yung population doon, ma'am. Then doon na nagsisimula, ma'am, yung pag kumbaga doon na, ma'am, nagsisimulang lumawak yung kaisipan mo, na ganito. Tapos pag natapik ito sa eskwelahan, mas lumalawak na, ma'am. Nagiging mas responsible ka na, ma'am, sa mga nakukuha mong information, ma'am, through school and proper education. That's all.
Okay, yes. That's a very good suggestion to use school education as a medium of understanding or determining different cultures. However, in my opinion lang naman, it's remotely possible to para mapag-connect yung mga culture kasi ang sinasabi naman dito sa cultural relativism and as what we've experiencing or as what we face, kahit nga sa mismong school, there will always be conflicts, differences of belief kasi kahit teacher-student relationships, your teacher might have different beliefs and as a student you also have different belief, and parang it will be hard to impose that this culture is the universal truth. This belief is the should be applicable to all, should be true to all, should be universal, kasi nga iba-iba tayo ng belief, and we can uniform our culture. So, ang sinasuggest ng cultural relativism is, yun nga, we should acknowledge diversity and just accept or respect na lang yung differences. But it's really a good suggestion na to use school as a medium of determining the cultures, and also to, as what Siv Calliope answered. So that is good. Okay. Last, before we proceed to number 2 question, Melchor, Candia, Jan Melchor.
Hi, hello po ma'am. Good afternoon po. I am audible po ba?
Yes po, loud and clear.
On my own notion po, the advantage of cultural relativism, idagdag ko na lang po ito since masabi naman po nila, it promotes equality and humanity with restrictions. On the other hand, one of the disadvantage of cultural relativism is, in some way, it creates bias in terms of making own decisions. For example, people tend to prefer to be with others. Kumbaga, may similar thoughts sila and feelings. And adaptation na lang yung isang ideas or rules sa isang place. So to conclude, I agree pa rin with cultural relativism, but with limitation and proper decisions. Knowing of what is right and good, and what is right but not good. So dapat kailangan pa rin pag-aralan muna yung situations or yung isang culture before we deal. Yun lamang po. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you that your answer is correct. It's good that you take side but put a limitation on the side that you chose. For example, you are for or you support cultural relativism but with limitations. So moving on with question number 2. Cite what are your personal experiences of Filipino culture, and what are the problems you encountered and how you address that problem. So, what are your Filipino culture that you find toxic na na-experience nyo, and paano siya naging toxic?
Ako po, ma'am.
Yes, Sam.
Ang maano ko po, ang number 1 experience ko po dyan is yung sa parang toxic Christianity po sa church.
Okay,
Ganun.
what about
Kasi po, ma'am, as a member of the LGBTQ community po, may mga na-receive din po akong discriminations po about dyan. Tapos, I think isa din po yun sa mga dahilan kung bakit parang napalayo po ako sa loob ng ng Diyos or sa simbahan po, and in the end I don't think I believe in anything po na regarding dyan. But masasabi ko lang po is tungkol po sa mga pakikialam po ng church sa mga bagay po na ganyan, lalo na po yung sa parang SOGI bill, same-sex marriage, and then yung issue din po yung tungkol sa bathroom, yung i-allow po yung transgender people na pumasok din po sa bathroom, ganon. Tapos ang mga dahilan po nila is kadalasan ko po nakikita kasalanan daw po sa Diyos, tapos parang hindi daw yun yung katawan na binigay ng Diyos, ganyan. Tapos bakit paano daw kung may maggamit po nung identity as a transgender person, tapos in the end daw po mangharas daw po sa sa bathroom, parang ganon. Tapos all I can say po is like, how can you say na transgender person yung gagawa ng crime na yan, kahit hindi naman, kasi kung yung straight person, cisgender na person magpapanggap na transgender just to harass other people, how can you say, bakit po yung blame para po nasa transgender people, parang ganon. Tapos yung sa Soji Bill din po, yung discrimination, yung una po nga sa group namin, yun po yung article na nahanap namin. Kasi po kahit unprovoked, wala naman na ginagawa yung tao based on their gender, ano po, nadi-discriminate po sila. Tapos sinasaktan po yung, tapos alam ko po din sa ibang countries, ang pagiging LGBTQ ay illegal pa rin, minsan po nakukulong pa sila, tapos wala pong ginagawa yung government, wala pong protection para sa kanila. Tapos yung mga incidents po na ganyan, parang mabilis lang po na sinisweep under the rug, parang hindi po masyado binibigyan ng pansin. So, ganun po.
Yes, thank you for sharing. So uh, that is why there is a separation of church and state. Kasi ang church talaga, yung church kasi or religion is they are still focused dun sa mga rules before pa, and they are sticking with that rules that are so ancient, and some of the rules kasi na sinusunod ng mga ibang religion is so ancient and not applicable na in the present. That is why buti na lang ang state recognizes also the rights of the people, so the particular Bill of Rights, human rights. So that is why minsan talaga toxic, you'll consider toxic ang isang religion kasi they are still inclined or very pa rin sila dun sa paniniwala na very noon pa, very luma na which are some hindi na applicable ngayon.
Yes po, ma'am. Tapos add ko pa po, ma'am, yung parang, yung sabi po nila na respect others' opinions, ganun. Tapos, wag daw po wag po ipilit daw sa kanila yung parang ganun na behavior daw, na lifestyle, parang ganun. Tapos, and then po, ma'am, sila din lang naman yung parang nagpupumilit ng religion nila sa ibang tao.
Yes, actually, the great hypocrites are those na super religious. But not all naman ng mga religious persons are hypocrites. Some kasi they use religion as an excuse or as a right to call that, to discriminate other people, especially the LGBTQIA plus community. So, parang as a Christian, or I'm not just Christian, as a person believing in an old belief, they are being self-entitled to discriminate the LGBT since it is not written on their laws or on their beliefs. So we acknowledge that, and I appreciate your sharing, Giselle. So anyone would like to also to answer number 2, share a personal experience that involved toxic Filipino culture